Konosuke Takeshita is a hell of a wrestling specimen if I've ever heard of one. 6'3", around like 235, hits like a truck, speed like a cruiser. Honestly, ever since AEW has introduced me to him, he has just become one of my favorites in the modern age. Just earlier this year, him and Darby had a hell of a sprint type of match on Dynamite to start the year off right. However, this past year in AEW, I wouldn't say it has been the best for him, at least to me. You know, he's had a couple good matches there, obviously. But this is a guy who beat Kenny Omega twice in a week, and yet it feels like none of that matters when he's strapped next to Don Callis. But you know what we're about on this channel. We're not about the negativity. We're not about wasting our time talking about things that we don't enjoy unless we're covering the Philadelphia games. But moving forward, instead, I want to turn towards Takeshita's latest venture. The G1 Climax is New Japan's annual round-robin tournament, and this year, Konosuke Takeshita entered his name into the competition. Now, there were a couple names that I wish were in his block, but nonetheless, I was excited to see the impact the Alpha would make in his first G1. Starting off the tournament strong, Takeshita starts his tournament against one of New Japan's new young stars, Tsuji. After his excursion, we saw Tsuji explode onto the scene with his exciting match against Narita last year. Since then, it has been all about piecing things together, really trying to figure out what works and doesn't work, and of course work towards that main event scene like the rest of his contemporaries. Starting off, Takeshita's entrance. Whenever he's in Japan, there's just something different about it. He gets better theme music, and overall to me, it just seems like he has more confidence in a way. We start off the match with both men trying to get a feel for each other's game, some lockups, some test of strengths. Takeshita is the first to really try the power game when he attempts a powerful elbow to Tsuji in the corner. However, Tsuji is able to dodge at the last second and his signature smile comes out. This sort of dynamic plays out even more from here on out, where it seems like Tsuji is just kind of toying with Takeshita. He lays in some stiff chops and kicks. There's a spot where Takeshita tries to run at Tsuji but is knocked down. Tsuji has the upper hand on Takeshita until he makes a mistake. Earlier, I mentioned speed like a cruiser. Tsuji throws Takeshita into the ropes, and we see that speed come into play as Takeshita just goes back and forth, building that speed up before taking Tsuji down with a flying lariat. Sending Tsuji to the outside, Takeshita shows off that cruiser-like speed again as he dives over the top rope onto Tsuji on the outside. The two clash on the outside before Takeshita throws Tsuji face first into the barricade. We see that confidence start to really shine through as Takeshita amps the crowd up before quieting them down so he can nail Tsuji with a loud elbow strike. Back in the ring, Takeshita eggs Tsuji on, begging him to put up some type of fight. Tsuji attempts some strikes, but each one sends him down on one knee. His frustration powers him to land an elbow strike though, but Takeshita retaliates with an even stronger one that sends Tsuji into the corner. Tsuji creates some space by hitting a foot stomp on Takeshita. The two men work back to their feet, with Tsuji doing an impressive vault to the top rope. He hits a huge Hurricane Rana on Takeshita, and this time it's his time to fly as he springboards onto Takeshita on the outside, springs onto the outside. We see Tsuji hit some big moves like the double knee gut buster, but it isn't enough to put Takeshita down. So we see Tsuji lock in the Boston Crab. We see Takeshita impressively have to crawl his way over to the ropes, but just as he's about to get there, Tsuji drags him back to the middle. The two men then get into a battle as each man attempts to suplex one another. Takeshita's strength in the end wins as he's able to hit Tsuji with a big old brain buster. The two men go back and forth before Takeshita lands a big running knee strike and then a big German suplex for a close 2-fall. The next spot sees both men fighting on the top turnbuckle, exchanging strikes, and we see Takeshita avoid a scary fall for a second. The two men then continue fighting before Tsuji hits a huge Spanish fly off the top rope. Still not enough, Tsuji sets up for a spear, but misses and instantly gets hit with a German suplex and then a poison Rana. Takeshita tries for the knee, but is hit by Tsuji's kick and then is slammed down. The two men then start to exchange forearm strikes, and Takeshita lands one that drops Tsuji straight to the mat. We then see a beautiful sequence of reversals and each man fighting out of one another's moves and pinfalls. Tsuji lands a huge headbutt followed by another double foot stomp, but still Takeshita kicks out. I have to mention, by this point, the crowd is rabid and these two have them in the palm of their hands. Tsuji sets up for that Gene Blast Spear, but Takeshita is able to counter it with a kick that causes the crowd to erupt. He then hits the Blue Thunder Bomb and then closes it with his spinning driver for the win. A crazy good match and a crazy good start to a G1 run. Takeshita's next match in the G1 takes on the formidable Jeff Cobb. 5'10", 262. Cobb is very much like Takeshita in the sense that he also mixes power and speed into his game. I think Cage Match describes Jeff Cobb best with their list of nicknames: the Hawaiian Juggernaut, the Imperial Unit, and Mr. Athletic. Point is, Jeff Cobb is an absolute unit and is going to be a powerful man for Takeshita to try and overcome. The bell rings and the two men immediately begin running into one another. Takeshita gets to jump on Cobb by landing a loud kick and then clotheslining him on the rebound off the ropes. We see Cobb strike as he pounces Takeshita into the air, and even Takeshita makes a face like damn. We see a fun little spot where Cobb steps on Takeshita's back and he pretends that he's using him as a surfing board. Takeshita gets caught in the ropes and eats a clobbering strike from Cobb. He then battles to avoid Cobb's suplexes, especially one on the apron, and nails him with an elbow that is enough to send him down. This sets up for yet another dive to the outside. Takeshita attempts to fly off the top rope next, but Cobb is there to stop him, and from the middle rope, Cobb hits a huge side suplex. Cobb then shows off that Mr. Athletic title by hitting a standing moonsault onto Takeshita. After this, Cobb is the one to head to the top, and Takeshita is now there to stop him. He hits a big suplex from the very top rope, and that ring shakes from the impact. The ref literally collapses into the corner off the impact. We see another funny spot where Takeshita and Cobb attempt to run into one another, but Takeshita is caught off guard and is backed into the corner by Cobb. Cobb attempts a suplex that Takeshita flips out of and nails the Poison Rana afterwards. Afterwards, he runs the ropes only to get hit with a huge clothesline. The two men remain even, especially in keeping each other grounded. The two men just go back and forth. We see Takeshita hit a huge German suplex. Cobb counters with a knee into a slam and then hits a huge choke slam. These two lads, man, they're giving it everything they have. Takeshita, after multiple attempts, finally hits the Blue Thunder Bomb, which is pretty impressive to watch. Both men hit jumping knee strikes on one another before Cobb knocks Takeshita to his knees with a headbutt. However, just when Cobb thinks he has this thing won, Takeshita lays in a huge forearm that sends Cobb to the ground. Takeshita then gets the lifeless Cobb up for the spinning driver to secure his second win in the G1 Climax tournament. 2 matches in, and Takeshita is already proving to be quite the fearsome competitor in his block. Our next match features another one of New Japan's young talents, Uemura. To be upfront, Yuya is one of the roster members I know the least about. I know his excursion was done in TNA, and when it comes to like the online community, which I know they aren't really a good representation, but you know, just using an example here, I often saw him regarded as like the weakest of the bunch, and that bunch being comprised of Shota Umino, Yota Tsuji, and Ren Narita. Those 4 were like the batch of young lions that sort of came back from excursion around the same time. They left for excursion around the same time, and like I said, out of that bunch, I always saw it was either him or Narita as being described as the weakest. And since his return from excursion, opinions kind of seem skewed. You know, the general consensus I see is that, you know, the first off, the main thing is that these 4 have a really tough task at hand. What these 4 are tasked with is being the rising young stars, but also needing to really accelerate their growth to take over what is currently a sort of stale main event scene over there in New Japan. With that all said, I'm very interested to see Yuya for the first time and see what direction, New Japan goes, having Takeshita face off against another one of their young talents. One thing I have to mention beforehand, especially for all of these, is I have a preference for watching with the Japanese commentators, but for this match there was some audio issues, so I had to watch with English commentary. And I mentioned this because it actually allowed me to learn some interesting context for this match. I learned that Uemura and Takeshita actually teamed together at the All Together event that was comprised of a bunch of different Japanese pro wrestling companies. And I believe it was in that event, and more specifically the main event, Uemura was the one who took the pin, prompting Takeshita to tell him maybe one day you'll be ready for the main event, but today was not that day. This really adds a lot to this match now, as you can only assume Uemura has something to prove to Takeshita after the events that took place. So we start off the match, and the two men start this match exchanging some holds. We see a cool spot where Uemura has the hands locked, and so Takeshita just keeps trying to roll out of it in different ways. However, Yuya just rolls along with him, keeping up with him to maintain that sort of technical advantage. We also get to see a lot of that technical prowess shows as, Yuya begins to target the left arm of Takeshita. We see Takeshita get sent to the outside with a clothesline, and Uemura attempts to follow it up with a dive, only to be met by a strike from Takeshita. Takeshita decides he wants the advantage from here on out and hits a huge brainbuster on the ramp. And keep in mind, New Japan's ramp, especially the setup for this show, is basically just a carpet across this cold stone floor. We see Takeshita trying to maintain this lead. He attempts different chokeholds on Uemura. We notice him, but the one thing we notice is him sort of favoring that left arm that Uemura was working on earlier. It is to that point that he really struggles to lock in any sort of chokehold, and especially try to apply pressure with said arm. Uemura, we see him attempt some chops on Takeshita, but each one kind of leaves Takeshita unfazed. So he attempts to run the ropes, but as soon as he comes back, he's immediately met with a huge knee by Takeshita. We see an exchange of strikes and chops between the two, with Yuya's chops getting louder and louder. I love the rope running from Uemura, especially because he's just able to land this huge flying strike that was really impressive. He lands a big takedown and drop kick combo as well. And we get yet another suplex from the top rope, this time by Takeshita. And this one is more impressive than the last, I want to say. Takeshita just has an immense amount of power, especially combining that with an unreal amount of balance that he has in this suplex on Uemura. The two begin to fight on the outside after a dive from Takeshita. This leads to Takeshita attempting to throw Yuya into the post, but Uemura reverses at the last second. And when Takeshita hits this post, it is so loud. We then see Uemura move the barricade and, run at Takeshita, but Takeshita moves. But he's able to stop his momentum with his leg. And so then when Takeshita attempts to hit him with an elbow, Uemura just moves out of the way at the last second. And you see Takeshita hit that post with full power. And even though he has his elbow pad, Takeshita still feels all the pain, and now both of Takeshita's arms are at risk. And Uemura knows this. He traps Takeshita's arm in the barricade and hits it with a running drop kick. And it's like from this point on, you see a fire lit in Yuya Uemura. He begins relentlessly chopping Takeshita in the corner, even when he falls. He knows Takeshita can't even get his arms up to defend himself, and so he's taking complete advantage. We see him lock in an arm bar, but Takeshita's large frame allows him to, get his foot on the rope to, get a rope break. And then we get a hot spot where Yuya lands a huge strike, but then Takeshita hits a huge knee plus his poison rana. But then Yuya hits a huge German that sees Takeshita basically land on his head, only for him to roll out of it and hit a huge lariat, only to then just be hit by a big drop kick by Uemura. And after regaining their strength, the two men again go back and forth, and this time we see Takeshita hit a blue thunder bomb. and then Yuya hits a dragon suplex, and then we get a good sort of test of strength spot. And commentary notes that like Takeshita has yet to really let on about his pain, you know, in a sense trying not to single out a single area, you know, like obviously his arms were hurting from Uemura's targeting earlier, but he's really not trying to show any pain so that, you know, Yuya doesn't zone in on one specific place. We know the arms are a point of target, but again, Takeshita isn't letting up that like, oh yeah, I'm in pain, these are the parts that are hurting me. And Yuya, you know, like I said, he doesn't know exactly where to target. I thought that was a really interesting spot, or not spot, but like a little tiny bit of story in this match. Takeshita lays in some strikes, but on the third attempt, he is slow due to the pain. This is when Uemura, he locks the arms in and attempts to hit one of his signature moves. The two men then battle for control, and when Takeshita is able to get out, he nails Uemura with an elbow that sends him crashing to the ground. And when I say crash, I mean crash. This man falls like a sack of bricks the moment he gets hit. Uemura somehow after this though is able to get an armbar locked in, but again, Takeshita's size helps him reach the ropes. Uemura goes up to the top rope and lands a huge frog splash, but it only gets two. And then from here, we see Takeshita, he hits a big suplex, takes the elbow pad off, wanting that world-class elbow. But Uemura is able to counter this with a backslide, and it is here that we see that technical prowess of Yuya come into play. Locking the arms in once again, Takeshita and Uemura, they engage in a series of headbutts before Uemura decides to use the momentum to his advantage. He tried to hit the suplex earlier, but Takeshita's size prevented it. This time, he pushes Takeshita into the corner and uses that momentum to then pull back and hit that suplex that he was trying to hit earlier. And with the arms locked in the whole time, Yuya is able to get the victory, handing Takeshita his first loss of the tournament. An absolute masterclass of storytelling, especially in the ring. This match alone makes me want to watch more of Uemura and, you know, root for him to reach his maximum potential. And overall, it was just a great display from these two men that I can only wish to see more of. Next up, Henare. Standing at 5'11", 231, the New Zealander is walking in with 2 victories in the tournament so far. Henare, like Uemura, is another member that I don't know too much about. I know of his time in Ospreay's United Empire and some of his matches, but again, like Uemura, I'm going in quite blind and not knowing what to expect from, you know, not only him, but what type of match he'll have with Takeshita. The two begin their match similar to the Cobb match, testing one another's strength. We see a spot where both men run the ropes and see who can move the other. The two men go back and forth exchanging forearms before Takeshita hits his signature flying lariat. The two men begin fighting on the outside, and we see Takeshita slam Henare into the ring post. On the ring apron, Takeshita lands a big DDT. As noted by commentary, Takeshita mainly starts to target Henare's head and upper body. We see Takeshita attempt the Blue Thunder Bomb, but Henare impressively counters it with a knee. We see some big sequences like Takeshita and Henare trading blows, some big lariats, but overall towards the end we see Takeshita on a sprint performing all his big moves from the elbow to the brainbuster to the spinning driver for the win. Overall a good match, but kind of hard to follow up the insanity of the Uemura match. Next up for Takeshita's G1 journey is taking on the leader of the Bullet Club, David Finlay. I'm going to be let it known now, I was spoiled with this match. I knew the outcome, and as soon as I saw it, I immediately hated it, but still, for the sake of the video, let's at least see how we got to that point. Right out the gate, we see Takeshita being very hard-hitting and aggressive. However, it's that aggressiveness that, you know, leads to David Finlay getting an advantage in this match. He charges at him, or he charges at David Finlay, who's in the corner, and it's a tumble off the top, and you know, he tumbles off the top rope and is sent to the outside. And from here, Finlay starts using that to his advantage. On the outside, we see him ram Takeshita into the railing twice. And the one thing I'll praise from this match is that this is the first match where we really get to see Takeshita work from underneath. All the previous matches, he was either even with his opponent or was the dominant man or had like some moments of underneath fighting in between, but this match it's like we firmly see him as the babyface fighting from underneath, and it makes for big momentum moments like getting the flying lariat to create space. We see how this impacts him, such as hitting the brainbuster but being unable to even attempt a pinfall due to the damage Finlay did earlier. We see Takeshita take another fall to the outside as he attempts to hit Finlay with a running knee. We see a brutal moment afterwards where Takeshita is sent through 2 sets of barricades on the outside. After some more fighting on the outside, we see Takeshita hit a risky move. With the ref distracted, Takeshita piles chairs on Finlay, who's downed on the outside. He then gets back in the ring and hits a huge dive onto Finlay. He takes out Finlay, but at the cost of his own back. Also, if done right, this should have huge effects on his future matches. That is one thing I like about tournaments, is seeing how the wear and tear from the previous matches carry over. We see the effects in this match as Finlay starts to target that back once they're back in the ring. We see Takeshita go for a senton, only for Finlay to get his knees up. Finlay follows this up with a backbreaker. He hits a couple of big moves, but again we see that babyface fight from Takeshita. We see him fighting off moves and countering Finlay's offense. One sequence I'd like to note, we see a spot where Takeshita attempts a roll up on Finlay, and when Finlay kicks out, Takeshita nails him with a forearm. He goes for the pin again, and again when Finlay kicks out, he's nailed with a forearm. So with the next pinfall, Finlay kicks out in a different style to avoid yet another forearm. Just wanted to highlight that real quick. Don't know if it was intentional, but in wrestling, it's always the small details. But how do we get to our end point? Well, classic Bullet Club fashion. The ref is taken out in the corner, and Takeshita hits a huge powerbomb, but of course, the pin doesn't happen as Finlay's manager Goto is distracting the ref from getting back in. This leads to Finlay using the shillelagh, but somehow it still isn't enough. Takeshita hits a huge Poison Rana and Blue Thunder Bomb sequence after this, but again, it isn't enough. Finally, we see Finlay hit his finishing move for the win right after. A good match. Still upset at the loss, I understand, everyone has to take their losses in the G1, but, and Takeshita was going to lose at some point, but to Finlay, can't say I'm the biggest fan of that decision, but that's just me personally. The next match is probably the one I am most excited for out of the entire tournament. Standing at 6 feet, around 227 pounds, Hirooki Goto is a dangerous man. A 21-year veteran in the wrestling business and one of the fiercest. Goto is in the later years of his career, and the main focus for him these past couple of years has really been his work in the tag division as one half of Bishamon, but that still doesn't mean he can't turn in a hard-hitting match, especially during the G1 season. I mean, the common joke is always, what does the G and G1 stand for? Goto. Similar to the Cobb and Henare matches, Takeshita and Goto are all about showcasing strength. However, Takeshita knows he also has to keep Goto guessing, as seen by pulling the flying lariat out so early in the match. Along with this, perhaps still feeling the effects of the Finlay match, Takeshita begins to use the outside to sort of gain an advantage. He DDTs Goto on the outside ramp and then again on the ring apron. Learning from the last match, Takeshita wants to once again lead. He doesn't want to, be behind, especially against an opponent as scary as Goto. However, Takeshita starts to get a bit too confident, this leads to him sort of talking down to Goto. Just like Noah Lyles though, I guess the talk is justified when you can back it up. The two get into a striking exchange and Takeshita is the one who comes out on top, knocking Goto down to the ground. Goto is able to get the better of Takeshita, catching him with a running lariat this time, and then using that momentum for more offense in the corner. Takeshita hits a Hurricane Rana that admittedly looks a bit slow, but still, it's kind of impressive to always see a guy like Takeshita get up there for it. He follows this with his patented dive to the outside. We see a nice sort of sequence of the two exchanging lariats in the corners before Takeshita once again catches Goto off guard, this time with a knee. Goto returns the favor by catching Takeshita on the rebound and hitting an Ushigoroshi. We see another forearm exchange, and again, Takeshita is getting the best of Goto. Laying in some very stiff strikes, Takeshita has Goto phased and is able to hit a big Blue Thunder Bomb, but it only gets 2. We see the two men do battle on the top rope, and after a series of strikes and headbutts, Goto comes out on top with a huge sunset flip powerbomb. And then someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but we see Takeshita hit his signature sequence in what feels like the first time all tournament, if not just in a while. It's that spot where he hits a driver and then immediately after transitions it into a German suplex. He tries to follow it up by, he tries to follow it up to keep the momentum going, but is immediately met with a big lariat from Goto. The final bits of this match see both men truly fighting. Goto hits a big move, Takeshita hits a big move. The two men fight with every ounce to counter each move. We see a big kick out spot from Takeshita that really sets the crowd on fire. And then probably my favorite spot of the match, both men are in their individual corners. Like two rams rushing at each other. Takeshita goes for the lariat, Goto goes for the headbutt. They meet in the middle, hit their moves, and both men stand there and you think it's an even affair until Takeshita drops to his knees. This is all the advantage Goto needs to hit his finish and get the victory. Going to be really tough deciding between this and the Uemura match. The crowd chanting for Goto afterward, after the match was just chilling, and I love the respect both men showed to one another. I know afterwards I learned that this is a very important match for Takeshita. He was really excited for this one. A great match in the already great G1 run for Takeshita. Takeshita finally gets a break as his next match in the tournament comes 3 days later. His opponent is El Phantasmo, an opponent that Takeshita is quite familiar with as the two were a part of a ladder match at AEW and New Japan's joint event Forbidden Door. What I'm most interested in, especially for this match, is to see the dynamic of the match. Phantasmo is a smaller and charismatic guy. I'm interested to see how that sort of affects the match, as up until this point, Takeshita has really been facing guys that were either big in height, weight, or both, with the exception of Finlay per se. So it's going to be interesting to see how he works with a guy like Phantasmo. Obviously, he's going to be able to work well, as we saw, like I mentioned, that Darby Allin match at the start of the year. But I'm interested to see, just what is the dynamic of this match going to be. We are in Corkin Hall for this one, so I'm expecting a red hot crowd. One of the first spots to highlight is Takeshita hitting the flying lariat. He's pretty much hit it in every match, but this one is especially worth mentioning because he flies with this one. I want to say Phantasmo was at least at the halfway point in the ring, maybe even a bit further back, and he just flies to hit this one. While his previous matches saw him trying to match the strength of his peers, we really see Takeshita tapping into his speed for Phantasmo. And it will be needed, as Phantasmo is especially quick and is slipping out of multiple moves. However, Phantasmo makes the mistake of trying to step into Takeshita's game of striking. But props to him as he eats a couple strikes and continues to go even when shaken. However, he still loses that battle and is sent wobbling around the ring. We get to see some great character work from Takeshita as a man in the crowd tries to lead an ELP chant. Takeshita signals with his hand for the crowd to quiet down, and the crowd quickly begins to start chanting for him instead. Once again though, Takeshita's size and speed is somewhat of a curse. He goes for the knee in the corner, and just like the Finlay match, we see Phantasmo dodge and it sends Takeshita flying to the outside. Phantasmo then hits a huge dive that sends Takeshita over the guardrail, and we see Phantasmo staying on it. He continues that speedy offense by hitting a huge springboard moonsault on Takeshita. The action continues in the ring with Phantasmo hitting 2 springboard moves back to back on a prone Takeshita. The two get in another striking exchange with Phantasmo actually coming out on top. He tries another springboard move, but Takeshita counters this into a beautiful Blue Thunder Bomb, one of the best from the tournament. I mentioned at the start that this match takes place 3 days after the Goto match. I mentioned this for a reason. See, at least in my own headcanon, Takeshita used those 3 days to really recover from the Goto match to be able to do what he's about to do next. Takeshita goes to the outside and sets up this table. If you don't know about the Japanese tables, strap in. You're more likely to break a Nokia phone than one of these. And if you do break a Japanese table, you're more likely to break a hole in it than to get a complete split like we're so used to seeing here in the US. I think, you know, especially back to some of the moments in New Japan where they had tables where even some of their biggest guys could barely, you know, get a table to crack, especially on like one end. Like, I think it was Omega and Ishii. I think they did like a spot where it was like, you know, the table would rather like give than break, and by that I mean like it would rather like slant off to one side with like the legs collapsing underneath it than like actually just do a split like we're so used to with the American tables, you know. But just gotta mention that, you know, because these tables are crazy, man. Like I said at the start of the video though, Konosuke Takeshita is a hell of a wrestling specimen if I've ever heard of one. The two battle over who is going through that table, with Takeshita landing a forearm strike followed by a knee strike to try and daze Phantasmo. The two continue to battle, even making their way to the top rope. We see some brutal strikes from Phantasmo that leads to a huge Hurricane Rana off the top, followed by a splash. Hurricane Rana, and then afterwards Phantasmo hits a big Poison Rana and then follows this with a lariat. However, all that offense still isn't enough to put Takeshita down. And I know what you're thinking. What happened to the table? You were just talking about the table and now you're going into a bunch of other sequences. Don't worry. That table is not forgotten about. The two start to fight to the outside again, and Phantasmo attempts to drive Takeshita through the table. However, it is Takeshita who reverses, and like the driver he hits in the ring, you know, the one where he hits it and then transitions to a German suplex, he uses that same driver to drive Phantasmo through the table. And again, it's probably a headcanon of mine, but I truly think Takeshita does not hit this move without the 3-day break that he had before, and knowing that he'll have another 3 days of rest after this Phantasmo match. Phantasmo somehow gets up and his back is all bloody, and he almost doesn't make it back in the ring in time, slipping on the outside twice. However, as soon as he gets in, he is met with a huge forearm strike. Phantasmo though is almost able to reverse the brainbuster into a winning roll-up, but Takeshita is able to kick out. He lands a super kick and gets another close fall. We see just some real good babyface fight out of Phantasmo, even though Takeshita is not really like going fully heel. But Phantasmo was definitely the babyface of this match because you see some crazy fight out of him, including a kick out at one after a big German suplex and lariat from Takeshita. But ultimately, it is Konosuke Takeshita that comes out on top with another win. Though it was mainly the competitive drive of the tournament, like I said, this was the closest we got to Takeshita really playing heel in the tournament so far, especially with that use of the table. A fiery match aided by a hot crowd, and again, Takeshita shows respect to Phantasmo after the match. Really good match from these guys. Takeshita's penultimate match of the tournament is against Oleg Boltin. Boltin, 31 years old, 6'1", 264, debuted for New Japan last year and already has over 100 matches under his belt. Just like others though, I don't know much about him and I'm interested to see what type of wrestler he is. The match starts off with the two men locking up. Despite his size, Boltin is showcasing a more technical approach, really trying to wrestle Takeshita to the mat and engage in various holds. We see Boltin respond to a Takeshita forearm with a big belly-to-belly suplex that sends Takeshita tumbling to the outside. From here, we see some signature stuff from Takeshita, dive to the outside, flying lariat, some forearm trading between the two men. We see some nice takedowns from Boltin as well. Boltin goes up the ropes and Takeshita uses that position to hit a blue thunder bomb. Both men go back and forth with their attacks, and it really turns into a battle of energy and stamina. For every move Takeshita hits, it seems Boltin is there with a move of his own. Takeshita even starts to get desperate with a roll-up to try and catch Boltin off guard. In the end though, Boltin is able to take Takeshita down for the win. Honestly, I'm not too upset with this outcome. It was a fun sprint of a match. My only thing is, Takeshita, likely takes this loss to Boltin solely to get him out of the playoffs. Now he would have to beat Narita in the final of his tournament and likely need Cobb to lose in the playoffs. Or sorry, not lose in the playoffs. Need Cobb to lose to get into the playoffs. Which, fair play. Takeshita isn't their guy and it's not like I'm expecting to win the whole thing. I'll expand on this more in the outro, but with that, we look towards Takeshita's final match of the tournament and see if he advances towards the playoffs. Takeshita's final tournament match sees him take on yet another of New Japan's young stars. Ren Narita is the other part of that young lion bunch that I mentioned of Uemura, Tsuji, and Uemura. Training in New Japan's LA dojo with Shibata. He reflected that training as some would say maybe a little too much. Many sort of just wrote him off as Shibata light. And to try and go against this and give him a new direction, we saw him turn heel and join House of Torture. After Takeshita got some great performances out of Tsuji and Uemura, I'm very interested to see what he can do with yet another of the young stars. The match already starts off in classic House of Torture style. As Takeshita's music hits, we're waiting a bit, and oh, there's House of Torture dragging Takeshita down to the ring, already beaten down. Before the bell even rings, Takeshita is going to have to fight from underneath. Narita starts the match working Takeshita's leg with a lock. Takeshita is able to break this hold with a rope break though. On the outside, Narita continues to work that leg by using the barricade to his advantage. Things even spill out into the crowd with Takeshita being thrown into the chairs. As soon as Takeshita is able to roll back into the ring afterwards, Narita is already on the attack. He even starts to use that ring post to really add some wear and tear to that knee. To try and get back into the mix, Takeshita attempts to use his strength to his advantage, but it is clear that that knee is starting to become a hindrance. He tries his signature dive, but collapses before even hitting the ropes. Narita tries to take advantage, but Takeshita takes him down with a lariat. We see a great sequence where Takeshita attempts the Blue Thunder Bomb, but Narita slides out of it. It looks like he'll reverse it into a roll-up, but instead he goes for the leg lock once again. Takeshita has to crawl to the ropes once again to save his leg, and after this, the two begin to fight on the top rope, and Takeshita has to power through the pain to hit a big suplex off the top. Narita locks in a guillotine, but Takeshita miraculously gets out of it and somehow turns it into a backwards driver. I love the selling here though. Normally Takeshita would transition into that German suplex, but he can only get the one move done. Togo and Evil then run in, take down the ref, and begin to work on Takeshita. They finish it off with the Magic Killer, and Takeshita's journey seems to be coming to an end. That is until he kicks out. However, the kick out takes out the ref, so this leads Togo and Evil coming back in the ring and doing more work on Takeshita. That is until Takeshita fights back and clears out Togo and Evil. Back to his focus though, Narita is there to take him down, and Takeshita just has to keep on fighting through it all. We see him hit a big power bomb on Narita, but it still isn't enough. Takeshita attempts another elbow strike, but Narita reverses that into a knee bar. Locked in so well, Takeshita almost taps. As soon as Takeshita maneuvers out, he does not waste time though. He hits a big German suplex and then follows it up with a big world-class elbow. And wait a second. I was fully prepared for this to be the last match. I was ready to end the script here and go into the outro, but Konosuke Takeshita does it. He beats Ren Narita, and Cobb ends up losing, and that now means that Konosuke Takeshita advances himself to the playoffs. He will go on like many others, worn down, broken down, but his journey and fight continues as he heads into the playoffs against the man he started this journey against. And just like that, we arrive to the playoffs the very next day. Whoever wins between the two men will advance to the semifinals to face David Finlay, who got a bye. Both men enter the ring with an all-time level of confidence, and I am going in with an all-time level of excitement. To see Takeshita in a big spot like this is the stuff of dreams, and to see him face off against Tsuji once again is just chef's kiss level of storytelling. His first G1 match, and now Tsuji has the opportunity to make it the last of Takeshita's tournament. The bell rings and the crowd is firmly behind Tsuji, and it makes sense. Despite how he's sort of ingrained himself throughout the duration of the tournament, Takeshita is still an outsider. Tsuji is the homegrown talent and arguably the young star of the bunch that has the crowd support the most, I would say. The two men start this match a little slow with a couple of lockups. Takeshita gets things going with his big flying lariat. We then see him hit a DDT to Tsuji on the ring apron, and we see him continue to sell that knee from yesterday's match with Narita. With other matches, he had days of rest. Today, he immediately goes into it, and it's not just another match. It's a match that could send him to the semifinals of the G1 Climax. Takeshita's mistake comes from attempting a move from the top. While not a rare sight for him, he can't afford to take risks like that with this knee. He goes for the senton and Tsuji gets the knees up. Down, Tsuji sees his opening. He begins to target that knee over and over. The two get into a little striking exchange, but Tsuji puts an end to it by kicking Takeshita's knee. Tsuji gets Takeshita in a leg lock that really focuses on wrenching that knee. Takeshita has to crawl to break this hold up, and slow to get up, Tsuji begins to toy with Takeshita. But Takeshita is finally able to create some breathing room with a lariat that sends Tsuji spinning. A big suplex sends Tsuji sprawling to the outside. The next spot is one that some might call into question, and I might too a little, just because of the nature of the selling and all that. Just like the Finlay match, Takeshita grabs a bunch of chairs and piles them on Tsuji. Now, I can't remember if the Finlay match saw him do a running dive, but here he has to use the ropes for assistance. As soon as he lands, the first thing Takeshita does is grab at his leg. Takeshita furthers the pain, all at the risk of doing whatever it takes to win this match. It will be interesting to see if this pays off or be the reason for his failure. And I think that's why I'm more inclined to let this spot slide, because it's like, it actually adds to the match, because even though it doesn't make sense necessarily selling wise for him to be able to hit that move, it still just goes to show he's trying to do everything he can to win this really important match, and that's what I love, that competitive drive. After this though, we see some, back and ring, back and forth spots, each man trying to gain the advantage. The sequence ends with both men hitting lariats and collapsing to the ground. The crowd is still firmly behind Tsuji, and their chants will him to being the first man to his feet. Tsuji beckons for Takeshita to get to his feet, and Takeshita can barely stand. The two meet like rams, butting heads, attempting to hit their signature moves. Tsuji is the one that is able to hit a driver for a close two. Tsuji keeps it going by attempting his Gene Blast, only to be met with a sick knee from Takeshita. This one's real great, as Takeshita literally catches him midair. The issue though, Takeshita cannot capitalize with a pin. After this, we see Takeshita attempt a top rope move, and this time it works out for him. Tsuji attempts to stop him at the top with a Spanish fly, but instead Takeshita counters with a top rope lariat. He gets a close 2-fall, but Takeshita is getting back into the mix of things. He lays in lariat after lariat to Tsuji, but Tsuji hits a big knee and lariat to answer back. However, Takeshita kicks out at 1. Tsuji then starts to lay the elbow strikes in, but Takeshita just keeps on fighting. It is a surprise headbutt that knocks Takeshita off his feet though, and from here, Tsuji attempts a springboard out of the corner, but Takeshita catches him by surprise with a blue thunderbomb. Getting to his feet, Tsuji is instantly met with Takeshita's elbow strike. Looking like at the end, Takeshita goes for the driver, only for Tsuji to escape and hit the Gene Blast. This looks like the end for Takeshita, except he just kicks out at 2. Tsuji attempts another Gene Blast, but goes right into the corner padding. Before he can recover, Takeshita hits him with a big German suplex. Takeshita takes the elbow pad off and is looking for that signature world-class elbow, only to turn around and eat a big Gene Blaster spear from Tsuji. What was the first match of his tournament is now the last match of his tournament. The finish comes out of nowhere, and it is one that I welcome. It is very surprising, but was set up perfectly. And in a way, it goes to show the wear and tear that the G1 puts on wrestlers. With a healthier knee, does Takeshita set up for the elbow strike faster? Does he dodge that move like before? Does he use his knee? Does he use his knee more, especially, to counter the Gene Blast move like we saw him do earlier? But except that after he countered it with that knee, he was struggling to get up. So it's like, if his knees were healthier, does he, counter that move the same way? Overall, a great display of wrestling from both men involved, and with that, Konosuke Takeshita's G1 run comes to an end. And with that, our video comes to a close. This was a legendary G1 Climax run if I have ever seen one. I am so glad that I made the commitment to watching Takeshita's journey. Truthfully, I don't think there was a single bad match in his tournament. But before I go into ranking his matches, I want to expand on something I said earlier. Obviously, I didn't expect Konosuke Takeshita to win this whole tournament. Like I said, he's an outside talent from AEW. Sorry for all the struggling with words. He's not their guy, He is not their guy. That is the phrase that stuck with me the most, and I kept repeating in my head as I watched this tournament, because watching the entire tournament, it made me wish Konosuke Takeshita was New Japan's guy. He was on another level this tournament, and it just brought something out of him and each of his opponents, and he did really great work with their crop of guys. With 3 out of the 4 stars pegged to be New Japan's next generation, he honestly did some of the best work I had seen from each of them. Him and Tsuji just clicked and had an interesting dynamic, especially story-wise, with Takeshita really calling into question what Tsuji is striving for. The match with Uemura was a barn burner of a match with a killer in-ring story. With Finlay and Narita, he came off as a compelling uber babyface trying to overcome all the odds. But in the end, he is not their guy. And it kills me that he's not their guy, because at the end of the day, Takeshita just seems right in New Japan. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, because online I saw a ton of other people making the same memes of like, Konosuke Takeshita now has to go back to AEW. We have to see him return to AEW and be latched to Don freaking Callis of all people. And this isn't even me saying that his heel turn that they did was a failure. He was getting crazy heat after the initial turn. Like I said, he beat Kenny freaking Omega twice in a week span, and yet it resulted in what? This is a guy that should be positioned as the future and really the now. This is a guy like Kenny Omega that should be presented on another level. Fans can get mad all they want, but even Kenny himself talked about wanting to have this different type of presentation in AEW. And let me get it out the way. This isn't me talking down on AEW and anything like that. I just want to see improvement, because Takeshita shouldn't be taking a backseat to some of the talent that has pushed them towards that backseat the past couple of years. I usually don't rant negatively like this on this channel, but quite literally, how could I not after this tournament? A part of me wishes for a world where New Japan is just somehow able to sign Takeshita, because he just fit them so well and helps with their new direction. In a perfect world, he is their new ace after, some of their top guys left and they need new young guys to be there. He can be their ace. He can be the guy that gets the very best out of Tsuji, Uemura, Narita, and Umino. I mean, like I said, we literally saw him do that with 3 out of the 4 in this tournament alone. Compelling matches, compelling stories. The feuds this man can have with their crop of talent, old and new, would be amazing. This tournament was a literal godsend because it hopefully leads to a reset for Takeshita. A reset that sees him presented like the beast he was in this tournament, and not some stinky horn theme music that he has with the Don Callis family. But getting back to the positive side, from worst to best, or sorry, not even worst to best, just mainly what matches I liked. I can't even say the least because, like I said, there wasn't a bad match, but just in terms of, how I would rank them if I had to, I would have to say Takeshita's matches from the tournament ranks as follows. I think the Ren Narita match goes last, followed by Henare, Boltin, Finlay, Cobb, Phantasmo, the first match with Tsuji, the second match with Tsuji, Goto, with the Uemura match being at the top. An all-around amazing tournament from an absolutely special talent in Konosuke Takeshita. Here's to hoping and praying that the Alpha continues to have a great healthy year with a proper elevation up the card and championship gold in his future.